The golden sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the vast African landscape. Among the villagers was a young woman named Amina, known not for wealth or power but for a heart as vast as the sky. Her presence was a soothing balm to those around her, her voice gentle yet filled with the strength of one who understood the weight of kindness. With dark, luminous eyes that held the wisdom of generations and a smile that could chase away the darkest storm, Amina embodied the spirit of her people. She was neither the daughter of a chief nor the child of a wealthy trader, but in the hearts of those who knew her, she was more precious than gold. Amina's days were spent tending to her small garden, helping elders with their daily chores, and guiding lost children back home with stories that made their eyes widen in wonder. She believed in the power of kindness, in the unseen hands of fate that wove lives together in ways no one could predict. While others in the village dreamt of riches or grand adventures, Amina found joy in the simple things: a well-told tale, the laughter of friends, the cool touch of the evening breeze. Yet, beneath her contentment, there was something else, an unspoken longing, a feeling that the world had something in store for her beyond the horizon. She did not chase it, nor did she dwell on it, but at times, when she looked up at the stars, she felt as if they whispered secrets only she could hear. Fate, it seemed, had a plan for her, one woven long before her birth. It would arrive not with warning, nor with grand fanfare, but quietly, as softly as the evening wind that carried stories across the land. And when it came, Amina would not realize that she was stepping into a destiny greater than she had ever imagined. The morning sun had barely risen when Amina set out for the river, balancing an earthen pot on her head with practiced ease. The path was familiar, lined with tall baobab trees that stood like ancient guardians of the land. Birds greeted the day with their songs, and the soft murmurs of the river called to her as she neared its banks. As she bent down to fill her pot, a movement in the distance caught her eye. A lone traveler, cloaked in dust from the road, walked toward the village with slow, weary steps. His clothes, though simple, carried an air of dignity, and his posture, even in exhaustion, spoke of one unaccustomed to bowing before others. His face was partly hidden beneath the folds of his headscarf, but his dark eyes flickered with intelligence and quiet observation. Amina hesitated for a moment. Strangers were rare in their village, and when they did appear, they were usually traders or travelers seeking shelter before continuing their journey. This man, however, carried no wares, no signs of trade or purpose. He was simply there, moving forward as if he had nowhere else to go. Seeing the strain in his steps, Amina approached. "Traveler, you look weary. Have you been walking long?" she asked, her voice gentle yet firm. The man lifted his gaze to hers, studying her as if trying to decide whether to trust her kindness. "Many days and nights," he answered, his voice deep and measured. "I have traveled far, searching for a place to rest." Amina saw the exhaustion etched in his face, the kind that came from more than just the journey. It was the weariness of someone carrying a burden unseen. Without another word, she lifted her pot and gestured toward the village. "Come. You will find food and shelter here." The traveler hesitated. "Why do you offer kindness so freely? You do not know me." Amina smiled. A full stomach and a place to rest should not be denied to those in need. The road is long for all who walk it. With that, she turned, and after a pause, the traveler followed. Back in the village, the presence of a stranger did not go unnoticed. Eyes followed him with suspicion, whispers trailing behind as Amina led him to her home. The village elders, seated beneath the great tree in the center, watched carefully, their expressions unreadable. Later that evening, after the traveler had eaten, an elder approached Amina's hut. He was a man of many seasons, his face lined with the wisdom of years. "Amina," he said, his tone carrying both warmth and caution, "we do not turn away those in need, but we also do not invite the unknown into our homes without question. You are a woman alone, should you not be more careful?" Amina met his gaze steadily. "A kind heart is not blind, elder. I have seen nothing in him to fear." The elder sighed, glancing toward the traveler, who sat quietly by the fire, lost in thought. "Even the river seems calm before a storm. Be wise, child." But Amina had already made up her mind. Something in the traveler's eyes told her there was more to him than a weary soul in need of rest. There was a story untold, a fate yet to unfold. And whether it was wisdom or simply the pull of destiny, she would not turn away. Unbeknownst to her, the man before her was no ordinary traveler. He was a king in disguise, fleeing from a palace where power had begun to poison those closest to him. He had left behind his crown, his riches, and his name to walk among his people as an ordinary man. And though Amina did not know it yet, her kindness had set into motion a story that would change both their lives forever. The days turned into weeks, and the mysterious traveler, who introduced himself as Adai, remained in the village. Unlike other passers-by who left after a night's rest, he did not speak of moving on, nor did he ask for anything beyond what was offered. Instead, he immersed himself in the daily life of the villagers, working alongside them without hesitation. At dawn, he helped the men mend fishing nets by the river, his hands surprisingly skilled for someone who claimed no trade. He joined the farmers in the fields, his strength apparent as he lifted baskets of yams and maize with ease. When the village elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree to settle disputes, Adai sat quietly at a distance, listening intently. Occasionally, he would speak, offering a perspective so thoughtful and fair that even the elders were forced to nod in grudging approval. Amina observed him from afar, noting his quiet strength. He was unlike the young men in the village, who boasted of their hunting skills or sought to impress with loud laughter and clever words. Adai did not seek attention, yet wherever he went, people took notice. He spoke little of himself, revealing no past, no family, no place he called home. It was as if he had simply appeared from the wind, carrying only the weight of untold stories. Despite this, Amina found herself drawn to him. She would catch glimpses of him through the trees as he worked, his face relaxed in quiet thought. Their paths crossed more often, by the river, where she washed clothes, or in the marketplace, where he helped an elderly woman carry her bundle of firewood. At first, their conversations were brief, polite exchanges of greetings and gratitude. But soon, they lingered. "Amina," he said one evening as they sat near a fire, the village settling into the hush of night. "Why do you trust so easily?" She glanced at him, surprised. "I do not trust easily. I trust what I see." "And what do you see?" His voice was soft, but there was an intensity in his gaze, as if her answer held a truth he needed to hear. Amina hesitated, then spoke honestly. "I see a man who carries no past, but does not run from the present. A man who works harder than he must, who listens more than he speaks. A man searching for something, though I do not know what." Adai looked at her for a long moment before finally saying, "And if I told you that I do not yet know what I am searching for?" She smiled. "Then I would tell you that when the river does not know where to go, it follows the land." From that night on, something unspoken grew between them. Their conversations stretched longer, their silences more comfortable. When they worked side by side, neither needed to speak to understand the other's presence. He would bring her a carved wooden comb he had whittled in the evenings, and she would leave an extra portion of food by his door. The villagers noticed, but said nothing, yet the whispers had begun. Then, one evening, Adai approached the elders beneath the great baobab tree. The village had gathered for the storytelling hour, where the griots recited ancient tales passed down for generations. But tonight, Aid's voice interrupted the rhythm of the stories. "I have come to ask for Amina's hand in marriage." A hush fell over the crowd. The elders exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Then the eldest among them, the same man who had once warned Amina about trusting strangers, spoke. "You are a good worker, Adai. A wise man, perhaps. But marriage is not a small matter. Who are you? Where do you come from? What family do you call your own?" Adai met the elder's gaze without flinching. "I have no family to present before you. No land to call my own. Only my hands, my heart, and my word." Murmurs spread through the gathering. A man with no family? No wealth? No history? Marriage was not simply a union between two hearts, it was a bond between families, a merging of legacies. To give Amina, a beloved daughter of the village, to a man without roots was unheard of. Amina, the elder turned to her, his voice heavy with concern. You are a woman of wisdom. Will you throw your future into the hands of a man who cannot even say where he belongs? Amina did not waver. She stood before the elders, before her people, before Adai himself, and said, a tree is not great because of the name it is given. It is great because of the fruit it bears. She turned to Adai, her voice steady. You have shown me who you are, not with words, but with your deeds. I will marry you. The elders sighed, their faces unreadable. The decision had been made. The village would not celebrate with the same joy as they did for other unions, for Amina had chosen a man of no known name. But in the quiet shadows of the firelight, Adai bowed his head ever so slightly in gratitude. And so, without fanfare, without the blessing of wealth or status, Amina and Adai became husband and wife. But what neither she nor the villagers knew was that the man they had hesitated to accept was not a nameless traveler at all. He was a king, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when truth and destiny would finally reveal themselves. Amina and Adai began their life together in a small hut at the edge of the village. It was not grand, but it was sturdy, built with walls of clay and a roof of dried palm leaves. The space inside was simple, a sleeping mat woven from raffia, a wooden table, and a few clay pots that Amina had inherited from her mother. There were no gold ornaments, no lavish gifts from family members, no great feast to mark their union. But there was warmth, the kind that comes from two hearts choosing each other, even when the world does not understand. Each morning, they rose before the sun stretched its golden fingers across the sky. Amina would fetch water from the river while Adai prepared their small plot of land for farming. Together, they tilled the soil, planted seeds, and worked side by side in quiet harmony. When the sun grew too hot, they rested beneath the shade of a baobab tree, sharing stories and laughter. In the evenings, they ate together by the fire, savoring the simple joys of a well-cooked meal, the crackling flames, and the soft hum of the night. Despite their peaceful life, the village had not forgotten its suspicions. At first, the whispers were soft, like leaves rustling in the wind. Who is he, truly? Women murmured as they pounded millet. Where did he come from? The men asked as they sharpened their hunting spears. Amina, who had always been so wise, had chosen a man without past or family. How could this be? The questions grew louder when the villagers began to notice things about Adai. For a man with no known history, he was unusually skilled. His hands, though calloused from labor, carried the grace of someone who had been taught discipline from a young age. He spoke with wisdom beyond his years, with a calm authority that made people listen when he spoke. Even the elders, though reluctant to admit it, had started seeking his opinion on matters of judgment. Did you notice how he walks? One of the older women whispered one evening. He does not walk like a common man. He walks like someone of great importance. Have you seen how he holds himself? A younger man added. Even when carrying a basket, his posture does not bend. It is as if he was trained never to bow. Still, Adai never spoke of his past, and Amina never asked. She saw the looks, heard the whispers, but she ignored them. She had chosen him not for the answers he gave, but for the man he was. And that was enough for her. But deep in the quiet corners of her heart, she sometimes wondered. One evening, as they sat together outside their hut, watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Amina finally spoke. Adai, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Are you happy here? He turned to her, surprised. Why do you ask such a thing? She looked into the distance, where the village lights flickered like distant stars. Because sometimes, when you think no one is watching, you look far away. As if you were searching for something beyond these fields, beyond this life. Adai was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. There are parts of me that belong to another life, Amina, he admitted. But that does not mean I am not happy here. He reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. You are my home now. Amina searched his eyes, but there was a wall she could not see past. She did not press him further. If he had a secret, he would tell her when he was ready. And if he never did, she would still love him all the same. But the village was not as patient. One day, a group of men gathered outside the elder's hut, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. A man should not live without a past, one of them said. He could be a criminal, a fugitive, or worse, an enemy from another land. One of the elders frowned. He has done nothing to harm us. Another shook his head. That does not mean we should trust him. A decision was made. The next morning, an elder approached Amina and Adai as they worked in the fields. His face was solemn, his voice heavy with the weight of duty. Adai, the village has been patient, but questions remain. You live among us, you share our food, yet we do not know who you are. It is time you speak the truth. Amina's heart pounded, but she said nothing. She turned to Adai, waiting for his response. Adai met the elder's gaze calmly. I have given this village my hands, my time, my labor, he said. I have harmed no one. Is that not enough? The elder sighed. A man must have roots. If he does not, how can we know where his loyalty lies? Amina stepped forward. His loyalty is here, she said firmly. Where he comes from does not change who he is now. But the elder shook his head. If he has nothing to hide, he will speak. Adai held Amina's gaze, and for a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, an apology, perhaps, or regret. He turned back to the elder. I have no answer to give you, he said quietly. The elder studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then you leave us no choice. That night, a meeting was called. The village would decide whether Adai could stay. Inside their small hut, Amina sat beside her husband, her mind racing. Adai, she whispered, they will not let this go. If you do not tell them the truth, they may ask you to leave. Adai took her hand in his grip steady. And if I told them, would they believe me? Amina frowned. What do you mean? He exhaled slowly. If I told them who I truly am, it would not make things easier. It would only bring more questions. More trouble. Amina's breath caught. She had always known there was more to him, but now, for the first time, she felt the weight of his secret pressing against them. Who are you, Adai? She whispered. He looked at her for a long time before finally saying, I am the man who loves you. But the truth, hidden behind his words, was beginning to crack. The village would not wait forever. And soon, fate would no longer allow his secret to remain buried. It was an ordinary morning when the royal guards arrived. Amina had just finished sweeping the front of their small hut when she heard the sound of hooves pounding against the earth. The village was never quiet, but this was different. A hush fell over the people as dust rose in the distance, carried by a procession unlike anything they had seen before. Tall men in gleaming tunics rode into the village on horseback, their spears glinting under the sun. They were not like the traders or travelers who occasionally passed through. These men carried the air of warriors, their expressions hard, their movements precise. And at the center of them, draped in regal colors, was a man with a chest full of golden ornaments, a general, perhaps, or someone of great importance. Amina stopped mid-step, gripping her broom tighter as the villagers emerged from their huts, whispering anxiously. The horses came to a halt before the great baobab tree where the elders gathered. Dust settled. The leader of the guards dismounted, removing his helmet to reveal a face aged by war but marked with fierce loyalty. His eyes scanned the crowd before his voice, strong and commanding, rang out. We seek our king, Adewale, son of Olanrawaju, rightful ruler of the great kingdom of Oyo. The name fell like thunder upon the village. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children closer, elders exchanged wary glances, and the men stood stiffly, uncertain of what to do. Amina felt her heart pound in her chest. A king? Here? Then, something else, movement beside her. She turned and saw Adai, standing still as stone. His hands, which had always been so steady, curled into fists. His face, always calm, was unreadable. But it was his eyes, those dark, knowing eyes, that told her everything. The royal guard's leader stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Adai. And then, before the entire village, the mighty warrior, the man who had likely fought in wars and stood before thrones, fell to his knees. "My king," he said, bowing his head. Amina felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The village erupted. "King," someone whispered. "He has been here all this time," another gasped. The elders, who had once doubted Aid's past, now looked upon him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The people who had whispered about his mysterious ways now stared at him with wide, astonished eyes. Amina, however, could not speak. She turned to her husband, the man she had tilled fields with, laughed with, loved in the quiet moments of dawn, and she saw him as if for the first time. A king. A ruler of a vast kingdom. A man who had been living in disguise, hiding among them. Hiding from her. "Adewale," she whispered, the name foreign on her tongue. "Adai, no," Adewale exhaled, his shoulders dropping slightly, as though the weight of his secret had finally been lifted. He turned to her, his expression filled with something she could not yet name. "I never meant to deceive you," he said softly. But Amina's world had already begun to unravel. One of the guards stood and addressed the village. "Our king disappeared nearly a year ago, leaving behind a kingdom in turmoil. We searched every land, every village, every path, yet he remained hidden." He turned to Adewale. "But at last, we have found you." Adewale remained silent, his gaze fixed on the earth. Amina took a step back. The firelight conversations, the silent glances, the refusal to speak of his past, it all made sense now. The way he carried himself, the quiet authority in his voice, the way even the elders had begun to unconsciously defer to him. He had never been a simple traveler. He had been a king, walking among commoners. And she, his wife, had been blind to it. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you hide from me?" Adewale turned to her, pain flickering across his features. "Because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for what I am." He took a step closer. "I did not want you to love a king. I wanted you to love me." Amina's breath caught. The guards remained silent, respectful of the moment, but the village was alive with murmurs. The elders, who had once doubted Adewale's worthiness, now seemed to struggle with the weight of their own judgment. Adewale turned to the head of the royal guards. "What has become of my kingdom?" The warrior hesitated before speaking. "The council has been in disarray, my king. Your absence left a void, and there are those who have tried to claim the throne in your stead. Some still believe you are dead." He bowed his head. "Your people need you." Amina felt the air leave her lungs. The words were a blade that cut through whatever dreams she had woven of their simple life. If his people needed him, that meant only one thing. He could not stay. The truth settled between them, unspoken but undeniable. He had belonged to her in this village, in this life of soil and sun and shared laughter. But he was not just hers to keep. He belonged to a kingdom, to a people, to a throne. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Adewale turned to her once more, reaching for her hand. "Amina, come with me," he said, his voice laced with both hope and fear. Her heart clenched. She had chosen him when she believed he was just a man with no past. Now, she had to choose again, knowing the truth, knowing what it would mean. To follow him meant leaving everything behind, the village, the fields, the quiet life they had built together. It meant stepping into a world she did not understand, a world of power, duty, and expectation. But to stay meant losing him. The village waited, the guards waited, and most of all, Adewale, her husband, her king, waited. Amina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of fate pressing down on her. She had to decide. Amina sat in silence long after the royal guards had delivered their message. The village, still reeling from the revelation, was caught between awe and disbelief. A traveler among them had turned out to be a king. And she, Amina, the simple village girl, was his wife. But was she truly meant to be a queen? The thought gnawed at her as the reality of her situation set in. She had spent her days carrying baskets of yams, weaving mats, and tending to the crops. She had never worn fine silks, never walked through palace halls, never been trained in royal customs. How could she, a woman of the earth, sit on a throne? That night, while the village buzzed with excitement, Amina sat outside their small hut, staring at the moon. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood, laughter, and hurried whispers. She heard the villagers talking, some with admiration, others with envy. "She will be a queen," an elder woman said, shaking her head in amazement. "And to think we doubted her choice," another chuckled. "But will she know how to rule?" a younger man murmured. "Being a king's wife is not the same as being a queen." Amina's stomach twisted. She felt a presence beside her. "Adewale." "You are quiet," he observed. She let out a soft breath. "I do not know how to be what they expect me to be." Adewale turned to her, his dark eyes steady. "And what do they expect you to be?" "A queen," she whispered. "A woman of power and grace. Someone who knows how to walk in gold-threaded robes, how to speak in the presence of nobles, how to carry the weight of a kingdom." She shook her head. "I am none of those things." Adewale took her hand. "Amina, do you know what makes a great queen?" She looked at him, waiting. "It is not wealth. Not fine clothes. Not palace walls." He smiled gently. "It is wisdom. It is kindness. It is the ability to see people, to understand them, to lead with a heart that beats for them." He squeezed her hand. "You already have all of that." She wanted to believe him. But the road ahead felt so uncertain. By morning, the village had prepared for their departure. The people gathered with gifts, woven baskets, dried herbs, handmade jewelry. Some still bowed in disbelief, while others watched with a mix of jealousy and pride. An elder woman cupped Amina's face. "You were always destined for something greater," she said. Amina swallowed past the lump in her throat. The drums began. Low at first, then growing louder, pulsing like a heartbeat through the village. The procession was grander than anything Amina had ever witnessed. The royal guards had brought horses draped in gold and crimson, their bridles embroidered with the symbols of the Oyo kingdom. Singers led the way, their voices rising in a song that told of a king's return and the woman who would stand beside him. Amina mounted a horse with Adewale beside her, and the journey began. The road stretched wide before them, winding through thick forests and rolling hills. Along the way, people from nearby villages gathered to watch. News had traveled fast, whispers of a missing king found, of a queen born from humble soil. As they rode, the scenery changed. The simple farmlands gave way to grander sights, vast rivers reflecting the sky, ancient trees that stood as silent witnesses to history. The air carried the scent of spices, the sound of distant flutes. Amina tried to absorb it all, but doubt still clung to her. Adewale must have sensed it because he leaned closer and said, "Tell me what you are thinking." She hesitated before admitting that "I do not belong in this world." He smiled. "Neither did I, once." She turned to him in surprise. "I was not born knowing how to be a king," he explained. "I was taught. I was shaped by those who believed in me." He met her gaze. "You do not need to be ready today, Amina. You only need to be willing to learn." The words settled deep within her. As the sun began to dip, they reached the outer edges of the kingdom. Towering gates rose before them, carved with symbols of past rulers. Beyond them, the palace shimmered in the evening light, grander than anything Amina had imagined. The walls were adorned with gold, the rooftops high and proud. The guards at the gates saw Adewale and fell to their knees. Amina took a deep breath. She had left as a village girl. But by the time she stepped beyond those gates, she would be something else entirely. The palace was a world unlike any Amina had ever known. As she stepped through its towering gates, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. The courtyards bustled with servants in fine robes, their feet barely making a sound against the polished stone. Intricate murals lined the palace walls, each telling a story of kings who had ruled before. The air smelled of burning incense, mingled with the rich aroma of spiced meats and fresh fruit. Yet, beneath the grandeur, there was tension. The royal court had gathered in the great hall, a sprawling chamber supported by towering pillars carved with symbols of power and legacy. At the far end, a golden throne sat upon a raised platform. Adewale's place. Amina had barely stepped inside when the murmurs began. She is a village woman. What does she know of ruling? How can a queen be chosen in secrecy? Amina kept her chin high, but inside, doubt gnawed at her. Then, a voice rang through the hall, firm and commanding. "This is the woman you have brought to be our queen?" A tall, severe-looking woman stepped forward. Her regal garments marked her as one of the elder council members. Her sharp gaze moved over Amina, scrutinizing her with barely concealed disapproval. "I am Lady Morwa," she said, her tone cool. "I have served this palace longer than you have lived, child." She turned to Adewale. "And you expect us to accept a queen we know nothing of?" Adewale remained calm, but his voice held authority. "She is my wife. She has walked beside me through struggle and hardship. I chose her not because of her birth, but because of her heart." Lady Morwa's expression did not soften. "A good heart is admirable, but a queen must be more than kind. She must be wise, strong, and capable of leading a kingdom." Amina's pulse quickened as the murmurs grew. Finally, another elder spoke. "Then let her prove it." Adewale's gaze darkened, but Amina knew this moment had been inevitable. "If she is to be queen," Lady Morwa continued, "let her be tested as all great leaders are." Adewale turned to Amina, his expression unreadable. "You do not have to do this," he murmured. But Amina lifted her chin. "Yes, I do." The court fell silent. Then Lady Morwa nodded. "3 tests," she declared. "Wisdom, patience, and leadership. If she fails, she cannot sit on the throne." Amina inhaled deeply, readying herself. The test of wisdom. The first test took place in the palace library, a vast room filled with scrolls, maps, and ancient texts. Amina sat before a panel of elders as Lady Morwa placed 3 golden goblets before her. "One is filled with poison, one with pure water, and one with a sleeping potion," she explained. "A queen must discern truth from deception. You may ask one question to help you choose." Amina studied the goblets. They looked identical, each filled with a clear liquid. She closed her eyes, thinking. A queen did not need to know everything, but she needed to ask the right questions. Finally, she spoke. "If I were dying of thirst, which one would you give me?" Lady Morwa smirked. "Clever girl." A servant stepped forward. "The second goblet." Amina smiled. "Then I choose the third." Gasps rippled through the room. Lady Morwa narrowed her eyes. "Explain." "If the second goblet was safe for me to drink when I was dying of thirst, then it is not the poison," Amina reasoned. "That leaves 2 options, the sleeping potion or the poison. But no one would reveal the safe choice so easily. The third goblet is the only answer." Lady Morwa's lips curled into a slow smile. "Correct. The test of patience." For the second test, Amina was taken to the royal gardens, where 3 young boys were waiting, each holding a small clay pot. "These children were given seeds to grow," Lady Morwa explained. "A queen must understand that power is not in haste but in patience." Each boy uncovered his pot. 2 of the pots had healthy sprouting plants, but the third was barren, nothing but soil. "Choose the one who will one day be a great farmer," Lady Morwa instructed. Amina knelt beside them, observing their faces. The first 2 boys smiled proudly, their eyes shining with confidence. But the third boy looked ashamed, his head lowered. She turned to him. "Did you water your seed?" "Yes," the boy whispered. "Every day." "Did you place it in the sun?" "Yes," he nodded. "But it never grew." Amina stood, her choice clear. This boy is the true farmer. A murmur spread through the crowd. Lady Morawa arched a brow. Why? Amina smiled gently. Because patience is not just waiting for success. It is continuing to try, even when there is no reward. She turned to the boy. You tended your seed without knowing if it would grow. That is true dedication. Lady Morawa's eyes gleamed with approval. Well chosen. The test of leadership. For the final test, Amina was brought before a gathering of palace workers, cooks, guards, seamstresses, and stable hands. Leaders are not served, Lady Morawa declared. They serve. She turned to Amina. For one day, you will live as they do. Amina spent the next hours working. She fetched water from the well, swept the great hall, helped prepare meals, and sat among the workers, listening to their struggles. As evening fell, Lady Morawa called her back. What have you learned? Amina smiled. That a kingdom is not ruled from the throne. It is ruled from the hearts of its people. Silence. Then, applause. The court, once skeptical, now looked at Amina with newfound respect. Even Lady Morawa nodded approvingly. You have passed, she declared. You may take your place beside our king. Adewale stepped forward, his eyes filled with pride. You were always meant to be queen, he whispered. Amina took his hand, lifting her chin. She had come to this palace doubting herself. But now, she knew the truth. She was not just a village girl. She was a queen. The morning of Amina's coronation dawned with the sky painted in streaks of gold and crimson, as if the heavens themselves celebrated the occasion. The palace, once a place of uncertainty for her, now stood before her like a second home. Servants moved swiftly through the grand halls, carrying rich fabrics, golden ornaments, and fragrant oils, preparing for the ceremony that would mark the beginning of a new era. Adewale had spared no effort in ensuring the event reflected the traditions of their ancestors. He wanted Amina to be crowned not just as his wife but as the rightful queen of the kingdom. The news of her success in the trials had spread beyond the palace walls, reaching every corner of the land. Nobles, villagers, and traders alike had gathered in the capital to witness the coronation of a woman who had once been a simple village girl. As the ceremonial drums began their steady rhythm, Amina was led into a sacred chamber within the palace. Elder women of the court, dressed in flowing robes adorned with intricate beadwork, surrounded her. They carried bowls filled with sacred oils, shea butter, and ground herbs, ingredients used for generations in the anointing of queens. One of the elder women, her face lined with wisdom, stepped forward and dipped her fingers into the scented oil. You were chosen not by birth, but by the spirits who see beyond riches, she murmured as she traced symbols of protection and strength on Amina's forehead and hands. May you rule with wisdom, may your heart remain humble, and may the land prosper under your care. Amina's breath hitched as she felt the weight of their words. She had once doubted her place here, but now, standing in this sacred space, she knew this was her destiny. Once the ritual was complete, she was adorned in a resplendent gown woven with golden threads and dyed in deep hues of red and indigo. A beaded crown, handcrafted by artisans, was placed upon her head, symbolizing her new status. Outside, the palace courtyard was alive with celebration. Dancers moved in perfect synchrony, their movements echoing the stories of their ancestors. The air was filled with the scent of roasted meat, fresh fruits, and spiced drinks, prepared for the grand feast that would follow. Musicians played traditional instruments, the talking drum carrying messages of joy and unity. Adewale stood at the heart of it all, his regal attire shimmering in the morning light. When he saw Amina step out, his eyes softened with admiration. He extended his hand, and she took it, their fingers intertwining as they walked together toward the throne. The chief priest raised his staff, signaling silence among the gathered crowd. People of the Oyo kingdom, today we witness the coronation of Queen Amina, chosen by the gods, proven by wisdom, and beloved by our king. His voice carried across the courtyard. Let all bear witness to this moment. Two elders stepped forward, holding a sacred crown crafted from gold and ivory. It was placed upon Amina's head as the crowd erupted into cheers, voices rising in song. From among the crowd, a familiar group stepped forward, Amina's people. Her village elders, childhood friends, and even those who had once doubted her stood in awe. The same village that had whispered about her marriage to a man with no history now saw her in her full glory. One elder woman wiped her eyes and whispered, she was always destined for greatness. Adai turned to his people and declared, today, we honor not just a queen, but the spirit of resilience, wisdom, and humility. May her reign bring prosperity to us all. As the cheers rose again, Amina felt her heart swell. She had once been a girl from a simple village, but today, she stood as a queen, not just in title, but in the hearts of the people. The coronation celebrations lasted for days, with feasting, dancing, and storytelling filling the palace courtyards. But as the last of the festivities faded, Amina knew that her true journey as queen was only beginning. Seated beside Adai on the royal throne, she observed the court with new eyes. The responsibilities of leadership were vast, solving disputes, overseeing trade, ensuring the well-being of the people. Amina, once a humble village woman, now held the power to shape the future of an entire kingdom. At first, there were challenges. Some nobles still viewed her as an outsider, whispering doubts behind closed doors. Others tested her, expecting her to fail. But Amina had learned resilience from her village days, tending fields under the scorching sun, negotiating with traders, listening to the concerns of her people. She was no stranger to hard work, and she applied that same dedication to her new role. She walked through the palace kitchens, speaking with the cooks. She sat with the farmers, discussing their struggles. She met with traders, learning the intricacies of commerce. The more she listened, the more she understood, true leadership was not about issuing commands from a throne, but about being among the people, feeling their joys and burdens. One of her first decrees as queen was to establish a council of village representatives. Every month, leaders from different regions came to the palace to voice their people's needs. It was an idea inspired by her upbringing, where every elder's voice mattered. Some nobles resisted the change, but as time passed, they saw the wisdom in her approach. The people felt heard, and trust in the monarchy grew stronger. Her greatest test came when a drought threatened the kingdom. The river levels dropped, the fields cracked with dryness, and the people feared for their harvest. Amina did not hesitate, she ordered palace granaries to be opened, ensuring food was shared among those in need. She organized water storage systems, sending workers to dig wells in regions that had none. When the drought finally ended, the people celebrated not just the return of the rains, but the queen who had stood with them through hardship. Adai watched with pride as Amina blossomed into a leader the kingdom adored. "You were born for this," he told her one evening, as they watched the sunset from the palace balcony. Amina smiled. "I was born to serve," she corrected. "That is what makes a queen." Years passed, and Amina's name became legendary. Songs were sung of the queen who rose from humble beginnings, who ruled with wisdom and kindness. Children sat at their elders' feet, listening to tales of how she had outwitted the court, saved the people from famine, and brought unity to the kingdom. Her village, once small and unnoticed, became a place of pilgrimage. Travelers came from distant lands to see the home of the queen who had changed the kingdom's fate. The elders, who had once doubted her, now spoke her name with reverence. But Amina never forgot where she came from. She visited her village often, walking barefoot through the same fields where she had once toiled. She sat with old friends, laughed with children, and honored the traditions of her ancestors. As she grew older, she trained the next generation of leaders, ensuring that wisdom, not just bloodline, determined the future of the kingdom. She knew that true legacy was not in golden statues or palace walls, but in the lives she touched and the hearts she inspired. One evening, as she and Adai watched their grandchildren play in the palace gardens, he turned to her with a soft smile. "Do you ever wonder how different life would have been if you had not helped a weary traveler that day?" Amina chuckled. "No," she said, squeezing his hand. "Because fate always finds a way." And so, long after her reign ended, the tale of Queen Amina lived on, whispered in the wind, sung in the villages, and etched into the heart of history, the story of the woman who never realized she was married to a king, until she became a queen.